Winter came down hard that year, turning the forward operating base into something from another world. Snow fell in sheets so thick, the perimeter lights barely cut through. Catherine Hart stood at the main gate with her visitor badge clipped to her wool coat, watching young soldiers hurry past with their faces buried in scarves. She was only here to visit her son. 3 days, maybe 4. Just a mother checking on her boy during his first winter deployment. No rank, no weapon, no past. Then the sirens split the white silence. Gunfire cracked through the frozen air. One by one, the guard towers went dark. While young soldiers scrambled for their officers, Catherine stood perfectly still in the courtyard, her eyes already measuring wind patterns she had once read at impossible distances. She had not come here to fight, but this winter, war had come looking for her. The checkpoint guard had barely glanced at her ID before waving her through. Catherine supposed that was the point of aging. You became invisible. Just another mother visiting her son at some godforsaken outpost near the northern border. Forward Operating Base Sentinel sat in a valley between 2 mountain ridges, surrounded by pine forests that had gone skeletal in the cold. The base itself was newer construction, modular buildings, reinforced barriers. A command center that looked like it had been dropped from the sky. Everything efficient, everything temporary. Catherine pulled her coat tighter as she walked toward the enlisted barracks. Her breath came out in clouds. The cold felt familiar in a way she did not want to examine. "Mrs. Hart?" She turned. A young man in full winter gear jogged toward her, his face breaking into a grin that made him look even younger than his 22 years. "Daniel." She smiled, and for a moment she was only a mother. "You look frozen." Gets down to -20 some nights. Daniel embraced her quickly, self-conscious about displays of affection in front of his unit. "I can't believe you actually came all the way out here. I wanted to see where you were stationed, make sure they were feeding you properly." He laughed. "The food is terrible, but everything else is fine. Come on, I'll show you around before it gets dark." Catherine followed her son through the base, listening to him talk about his squad, his duties, the monotony of winter guard rotations. She nodded and asked the right questions. She did not mention that she had already cataloged 17 defensive weaknesses in the first 5 minutes. She did not point out that the western guard tower had a blind spot where the tree line crept too close. She did not say that half these soldiers moved like they had never been under fire, because that was not who she was anymore. "You'll stay in the visitor quarters," Daniel was saying. "It's not fancy, but it's warm. There's a small rec room where families can Mom, you okay?" Catherine realized she had stopped walking. Her eyes were on the ridgeline, where the trees stood black against the white sky. Something about the pattern of the branches. Something about the way the snow had drifted. "I'm fine," she said. "Just taking it all in." But she was not fine. She was remembering things she had spent 15 years trying to forget. The visitor quarters were exactly what Daniel had promised, a converted storage building with 4 small rooms, a shared bathroom, and a coffee maker that looked like it predated the base itself. Catherine set her bag on the narrow bed and sat down, letting herself feel the exhaustion of the long journey. Through the small window, she could see soldiers moving between buildings. Most of them looked like children playing dress-up in their winter gear, fresh out of training, eager and terrified in equal measure. Daniel was out there somewhere, pulling his first real deployment in conditions that could kill you just as easily as enemy fire. She should not have come. No, she should have come years ago. She should have told him the truth before he signed up, before he followed in footsteps he did not even know existed. Catherine stood and unpacked her few belongings with methodical precision. Spare clothes, toiletries, a book she would not read. She had learned long ago that motion helped quiet the mind. Outside, the light was already fading. The mountains turned purple against the pale sky. Somewhere beyond those peaks, in territory that belonged to no one and everyone, other people were watching this base the same way she had once watched targets half a world away. She could feel it, the attention, the patience of predators. Catherine went to dinner in the mess hall, where she ate alongside other visiting family members and off-duty soldiers. The food was indeed terrible. Daniel joined her when he could, his squad mates teasing him about his mother visiting. She smiled and played her part perfectly. Just before lights out, he walked her back to the visitor quarters. "You sure you're okay here?" he asked. "It's pretty bare bones. I've stayed in worse places." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Daniel gave her a curious look. "When?" "Oh, you know, budget hotels. That hostel in Prague when I was backpacking in my 20s. The lie came easily. She had been lying for so long." He kissed her cheek. "Get some rest. I'm on duty tomorrow night. but we can have breakfast." "I'd like that." Catherine watched him jog back toward the barracks, his breath trailing behind him like a ghost. Then she went inside and lay down on the bed without undressing. Sleep would not come. It never did in places like this. Instead, she listened to the base settle into its nighttime rhythms. Guard rotations, the rumble of generators, boots on frozen ground, and underneath it all, a silence that felt too deep. Catherine closed her eyes and tried to remember the last time she had held a rifle. 14 years, 7 months, 18 days. Not that she was counting. The snow started just after midnight. Catherine was still awake when the first flakes began to fall. She watched through her window as the compound transformed, edges softening, colors draining away. Within an hour, visibility had dropped to almost nothing. She got up and dressed in the dark, pulling on layers. Her hands moved with old efficiency, checking zippers and making sure nothing would rattle or catch. Muscle memory from another life. The base was quiet except for the wind. Catherine slipped outside and stood in the swirling white, letting her eyes adjust. The guard towers were lit but barely visible. The perimeter fence disappeared into the storm. This was bad weather for defense. Sensors would be compromised. Thermal imaging would be useless. Sound would carry strangely or not at all. Perfect weather for an attack. She walked slowly along the inner perimeter path, keeping to the shadows. Just a restless visitor who could not sleep. Nothing suspicious about that. But her eyes were working, cataloging everything. The way the snow had already drifted against the east wall. The footprints leading to and from the guard posts, too regular, too predictable. The dogs in the kennel near the command center, pacing and whining in a way that set her teeth on edge. Catherine had worked with military dogs before. They did not act like that without reason. She was near the western tower when she heard it. Not a sound. Exactly. The absence of sound. The birds that had been calling earlier had gone silent. The natural creaks and movements of the forest had stopped. Her hands started to shake. She clenched them into fists. It was nothing. Paranoia. 15 years out of the field, and she was jumping at shadows. But the dogs were still pacing. Catherine looked up at the western tower. A young soldier stood watch, his attention on a tablet rather than the tree line. She could see the glow of the screen reflecting off his face. "Excuse me," she called up softly. He startled, nearly dropping the tablet. "Ma'am, you shouldn't be out here." "I couldn't sleep." "Have you noticed anything unusual tonight?" "Just the storm." He was embarrassed about being caught on his device. "Visibility is pretty bad." "What about the dogs? What about them? They seem agitated." The soldier glanced toward the kennel. "They always get weird in storms." "Don't worry, ma'am. We've got sensors all around the perimeter. If anything was out there, we'd know." Catherine nodded and walked away. The soldier went back to his tablet. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that these young people knew what they were doing, that the technology would save them, that she was just a paranoid old woman seeing threats where none existed. But her instincts were screaming. She went back to her quarters and tried to rationalize it. Probably just pre-deployment jitters from the soldiers affecting the animals. Probably just a storm making everything feel ominous. Probably nothing. She lay down again, still dressed, and stared at the ceiling. Daniel was on duty tonight. Somewhere out there in the white darkness, her son was standing watch at a base that felt all wrong. Catherine got up and opened her bag. At the very bottom, wrapped in a scarf, was something she had promised herself she would never touch again. A small notebook. Pages filled with numbers and calculations, range tables and wind charts, written in her own hand from another lifetime. She had kept it as a reminder of who she used to be, who she could never be again. She held it now and felt the weight of all those years. The wind rattled the window. Snow piled against the glass. Catherine had been a mother for 22 years. But before that, she had been something else entirely. Something with a different name and a different purpose. She had been the person you called when the target was impossible. When the distance was too far, the conditions too poor, the margin for error too small. She had been the ghost in the crosshairs. And tonight, with snow falling and dogs pacing and silence spreading through the forest, every instinct she had spent 15 years burying was telling her the same thing. Someone was coming. Catherine stood and went to the window. She could barely see the guard towers through the storm. Young soldiers standing watch, trusting their sensors, believing they were safe. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and whispered, "Please let me be wrong." But she had never been wrong about this before. The attack came at 0400. Catherine was standing at her window when the lights went out. Not flickering, not a power surge, just instant darkness across the entire compound. Then the sirens. She was moving before conscious thought caught up. Out the door, into chaos. Soldiers spilling from barracks, some still pulling on gear. Officers shouting orders. The crack of gunfire from multiple directions. Catherine ran toward the sound of Daniel's voice. He was in the eastern sector with his squad, trying to form a defensive position while bullets chewed through the sandbags around them. In the dim emergency lighting, Catherine could see the fear on their faces. These were children who had trained for this but never believed it would happen. Daniel. She slid into cover beside him. "Mom, get to the bunker," his voice cracked. "Now." "Where's your commanding officer?" "Captain Morrison is down. We can't reach Lieutenant Hayes." "Mom, please." An explosion lit up the night. The northeastern tower collapsed in a shower of sparks and metal. Catherine grabbed Daniel's shoulders and looked him in the eyes. "Listen to me. Do you trust me?" "What? Do you trust me?" "Of course. But then do exactly what I say. Get your squad to fall back to the command center. Covering fire, leapfrog formation. Move now." Something in her voice, the command, the certainty, made him stop arguing. "Second squad. On me. Covering fire." Catherine watched them move, their execution sloppy but functional. She scanned the perimeter, tracking the enemy fire patterns. 3 points of attack. No. 4. Coordinated. Professional. This was not some ragtag militia. These were trained soldiers. A young corporal stumbled past her, bleeding from a head wound. His rifle clattered to the ground. Catherine picked it up. The weight was familiar. Too familiar. She ran toward the western tower, the one with the best sightline to the tree line. The soldier who had been on watch was huddled behind the sandbags, hyperventilating. "I need this position," Catherine said. "Lady, get the hell out of..." "I'm taking this position. You're going to the command center. Go. Now." Maybe it was her tone. Maybe it was the way she handled the rifle. The soldier scrambled down the tower ladder without another word. Catherine was alone. She dropped prone behind the sandbags and brought the rifle to her shoulder. Her hands had stopped shaking. The chaos around her faded to background noise. This was the part she had tried to forget. The clarity, the cold focus that came over her when she sighted down a scope. She could not see the scope properly in the dark. She adjusted, feeling for the controls by touch, bringing up the night vision. Green-tinted world, snow falling through empty space, trees, movement. There, a figure in winter camouflage, 300 meters out, directing fire with hand signals, squad leader or spotter. Catherine calculated wind, drop, the way snow would affect the bullet's path. Variables she had not thought about in 14 years, coming back like breathing. She exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The figure dropped. The enemy fire from that sector stopped. Catherine was already acquiring the next target. The second shot was easier, muscle memory taking over. A sniper in the south tree line, 400 meters, elevated position. Catherine adjusted for the angle. Fired. Movement stopped. Reload. Breathe. Acquire. The rifle was not what she was used to. The scope was different, but her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget. Another target. Another breath. Another shot. Someone was screaming her name. Catherine ignored it. There were still shooters in the tree line, still soldiers on this base who would die if she stopped. She found the next threat. A machine gunner setting up on a small ridge. Dangerous. 500 meters at least, through falling snow. Catherine did the math in her head, drew on knowledge that had no business still being there after so many years. She fired. The machine gun went silent before it could open up. Daniel was climbing the tower. His face was white with shock. "Stay down," Catherine said calmly. She was tracking another target. "What the hell are you doing?" "Saving your base. Get on the radio. Tell whoever's in command that the western approach is clear. Enemy forces are pulling back from the south. Main threat is northeast, 200 meters, suppressing fire on the command center." "How do you..." "Daniel, the radio. Now." He stared at her, at the rifle in her hands, at the way she moved with it like it was part of her body. Then he grabbed the radio with shaking hands. Catherine kept firing, methodical, precise. Each shot placed with the kind of accuracy that only came from thousands of hours of practice and dozens of real-world engagements. The enemy had expected an easy target, a base full of green soldiers in the middle of a winter storm. They had not expected this. They definitely had not expected her. She heard voices on Daniel's radio. Confusion. Someone demanding to know who was providing overwatch. Catherine did not care. She had eyes on another target, then another. The enemy began to retreat. Not a rout. They were too professional for that. But they were pulling back, consolidating, trying to understand what had gone wrong with their assault. Catherine kept pressure on them. Every time a figure moved in the tree line, she put a round near them. Not always killing shots, now she was running low on ammunition, but close enough to keep them scared. Close enough to keep them moving away from the base. Daniel was talking rapidly into the radio. She caught fragments. Western Tower. Unknown shooter. Extremely accurate. I don't know. She's my mother. Catherine's hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. And for the first time in 14 years, she felt like herself. Not the mother who baked cookies and went to parent-teacher conferences. Not the woman who had built a quiet life in a quiet town. The other person. The one she had buried. The one who had once been called the best long-range shooter in her unit. The one whose name had been quietly removed from official records because some operations were never meant to be acknowledged. Another figure in the tree line. Catherine put a round right next to his head. He dove for cover and did not come back up. The eastern sky was starting to lighten. Dawn coming through the storm. The enemy fire had almost completely stopped. Catherine set the rifle down gently and finally looked at her son. Daniel was staring at her like she was a stranger. "We need to talk," Catherine said quietly. The command center was organized chaos. Officers barking orders. Medics treating wounded. Communication specialists trying to get signals through the storm. Catherine walked in with Daniel, and the room gradually fell silent. A gray-haired officer with blood on his sleeve turned to face her. Major Patterson, according to his name tape. Mrs. Hart. His voice was carefully neutral. "I'm told you provided covering fire during the attack." "Yes, sir." "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Catherine met his eyes. "A long time ago. Different name, different life." Patterson studied her for a long moment. Then he gestured to a young lieutenant. "Pull up classified personnel files. Cross-reference Hart with special operations, 15 to 20 years back." "Sir, I don't have clearance for." "I'm giving you temporary clearance. Do it." The room waited. Catherine stood very still. Beside her, Daniel looked like he was trying to solve an impossible equation. The lieutenant's computer beeped. His eyes went wide. "Sir, I'm showing a file that's been sealed. I can't access the details, but the flag says Tier 1 asset retired. And there's a note that reads, do not contact, do not activate, do not acknowledge." Patterson turned back to Catherine. "What's your real name?" "Catherine Hart is my real name now. It's been my legal name for 14 years. And before that, she had spent so long hiding this, protecting it, making sure no one would ever connect the soccer mom in Ohio to the woman who had once operated in places that did not officially exist. But that was over now. The moment she picked up the rifle, it was over. "Catherine Reeves," she said quietly, "formerly staff sergeant, formerly attached to operations I can't discuss, formerly a lot of things." Daniel made a sound like he had been punched. Patterson nodded slowly. "I've heard stories about a Reeves, long-range specialist, off-the-books deployments. There was a situation in Kandahar and another in the Balkans." He trailed off. "Those were just stories." "Weren't they?" "Some of them. Jesus Christ." Patterson sat down heavily. "You just happened to be visiting your son when we got hit? Pure coincidence." "Do you believe in coincidences, Mrs. Hart?" "Not usually. But I wasn't activated. I wasn't called. I came here because Daniel is my son, and I wanted to see him." She paused. "What happened tonight? I didn't plan that. I didn't want it. But I wasn't going to let those soldiers die." The major looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood and offered his hand. "Thank you," he said simply. Catherine shook it. "You need to improve your perimeter defense. The Western approach has a blind spot. Your guard rotations are too predictable, and your soldiers need more training in low-visibility combat." A hint of a smile crossed Patterson's face. "Anything else?" "Yes. The attack tonight was professional. Whoever hit you knew what they were doing. They'll try again, and they'll adjust their tactics. I'd recommend immediate fortification of the northeastern sector and reassignment of your most experienced personnel to—" "Mom," Daniel's voice was small, broken. Can we talk, please?" Catherine looked at her son, at the betrayal and confusion in his eyes. "Of course," she said softly. They walked out of the command center together, into the cold dawn. The snow had stopped. The base was a wreck, damaged towers, scattered equipment, medics still working on the wounded. Daniel led her to a quiet spot behind the supply building. Then he turned to face her. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm your mother." "No, I mean, yes, but—" He ran his hands through his hair. "You were special operations? You were a sniper? A Tier 1 asset? Mom, What the hell? Catherine leaned against the wall. She was suddenly very tired. I joined the military at 18, she said. I was good at shooting. Very good. They moved me into specialized units. I did work that was important and necessary and classified. I did it for 8 years. And then I retired, changed my name, and built a different life. Why didn't you tell me? Because that person is dead. I buried her. I became someone new. Clearly not that buried, Daniel said bitterly. You just picked up a rifle and turned into whatever that was. I did what I had to do. You lied to me my entire life. I protected you. Catherine's voice rose, then fell. I protected you from knowing what I was, what I did, the things I saw, and the things I wanted you to have a normal mother, a normal childhood, not the daughter of a what? A hero? Someone who saves lives? A killer, Daniel. The words hung in the cold air. That's what I was, Catherine said quietly. I was very good at killing people from very far away. I did it because my country asked me to, because those people needed to be killed. But that doesn't change what I was. And I didn't want that to be your legacy. Daniel was crying now. You should have told me. Before I enlisted. God, Mom. I thought I was following Dad's example. He was infantry, regular army. But you were something else entirely. Your father was a good man. Did he know? Catherine nodded. I told him before we got married. It was the only fair thing to do. He understood why I needed to leave that life behind. He helped me become someone new. And then he died when I was 12. And you never told me the truth. I thought about it. Every year. But how do you tell your child that their mother used to bake times to coming it again? She stopped. Started again. I wanted you to see me as someone who baked cookies and helped with homework. Not someone who could calculate windage and bullet drop in a snowstorm. I could have handled it. You were a child, Daniel. I'm not a child anymore. I know. Catherine's voice was very soft. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for lying, for hiding, for letting you find out this way. But I'm not sorry for saving your life tonight. I'm not sorry for being what I needed to be when this base needed it. Daniel wiped his eyes roughly. Are you going to stay? Help us? That's not my decision. The hell it isn't. You're the best shooter on this base. Probably the best shooter in the entire region. I'm a retired civilian, Daniel. I have no authority here, and I can't just become that person again. I can't. You already did. Catherine had no answer for that. They stood in silence while the sun rose higher, burning off the last of the storm clouds. The base was coming back to life. Repair crews, casualty reports. Someone would have to notify families about the soldiers who had not made it through the night. I need time, Daniel said finally, to process this, to figure out. I don't know how I feel. I understand. But Mom, he looked at her. Thank you for saving us. Whatever else you are or were, thank you for that. Catherine nodded. She did not trust herself to speak. Daniel walked away, back toward his unit, back to the life he had chosen, which was so much more complicated now. Catherine stayed where she was, watching the base wake up, watching soldiers move with the careful awareness of people who had just learned they were not invincible. She had broken every promise she made to herself. She had picked up a rifle. She had let the old skills resurface. She had shown the world who she used to be. There was no going back from this. Major Patterson found her an hour later. We've been in contact with higher command, he said. They want to know if you're available for consultation. I'm retired. They're aware. They also said if you need anything, equipment, personnel, authority, it's yours. Apparently your file has some very interesting notes from very important people. Catherine almost smiled. I'm sure it does. Will you help us? This attack was just the beginning. Whoever hit us will try again. We've got 300 soldiers on this base, most of them green. We need every advantage. I'm not a soldier anymore, Major. No, but you're a mother. And there are 300 mothers' children on this base who might not make it home without your help. It was a low blow. It was also completely effective. Catherine looked out at the base. At young men and women trying to look brave. At Daniel, visible in the distance, talking with his squad. Temporary consultation only, she said. I train your people. I help improve your defenses. And when the immediate threat is over, I go back to being nobody. Deal. They shook on it. Catherine went back to her quarters to get her notebook, the one with all the old calculations, the one she had kept as a reminder of who she used to be. She was going to need it. The next 72 hours blurred together. Catherine worked with the base's defensive teams, identifying weaknesses, repositioning assets, training the most promising shooters in techniques they had never learned in basic. She was clinical, professional. She did not talk about her past except to establish credibility. But everyone knew. Word had spread that the quiet woman in civilian clothes was the reason they had survived the first attack, that she had fired 27 shots and scored 27 hits, that she was something out of legend. The soldiers looked at her with awe and fear in equal measure. Daniel avoided her except when duty required interaction. When they did speak, he was polite and distant. It hurt more than Catherine wanted to admit. On the third day, intelligence confirmed what everyone had suspected. The attack was not random. A well-funded militant group had targeted Forward Operating Base Sentinel as part of a larger campaign. They would be back. Major Patterson called a briefing in the command center. "Latest satellite imagery shows movement in the northern ridge," he said, pointing to a map. "Estimate 40 to 50 combatants, possibly more. They're staging for another assault, probably within the next 48 hours." The room was tense. Everyone remembered how close they had come to being overrun. "Mrs. Hart has provided recommendations for defensive improvements," Patterson continued. "We've implemented what we can in the time available. But if they hit us with superior numbers," he did not need to finish the sentence. Catherine studied the map. "They'll come from the north this time. The western approach failed because of the terrain. They'll try to use the ridge for cover and come down hard on the northeastern sector." A lieutenant frowned. "How can you be sure?" "Because that's what I would do." No one argued with her. "We need forward observation," Catherine said. "Someone needs to be on that ridge before they make their move. Gather intelligence, provide early warning, possibly disrupt their staging area." "That's a suicide mission," someone muttered. "Not if you know what you're doing." Patterson looked at her. "You volunteering?" "I'm the only one here with the skill set." "Mom, no." Daniel spoke up from the back of the room. "Absolutely not. It's the best tactical option. I don't care. You're not going up there alone." Catherine turned to face her son. They had not really talked since the revelation. Now his face was set with determination. "This is what I do," she said quietly. "Then I'm coming with you." "Daniel, I'm not a child. I'm a soldier. And if you're going, I'm going." They stared at each other. The room watched. Finally, Patterson cleared his throat. "Private Hart makes a valid point. Two-person team is safer than solo. And frankly, we need you back here, Mrs. Hart. If this mission goes sideways, you're the one who can coordinate our defense. Then send someone else with him. No one else here has worked with you. Your son knows how you operate. He trusts you. And right now, trust might be more important than experience." It was a terrible idea for so many reasons. But it was also the truth. "We leave before dawn," Catherine said. "Light gear, observation only. If we make contact, we extract immediately." Daniel nodded. "I'll prep our equipment." The briefing broke up. Soldiers dispersed to their assignments. Catherine stood alone with the map, tracing the route they would take up the ridge. Someone stepped beside her. "Daniel, I'm still angry," he said quietly. "About the lying, the secrets, all of it. I know. But I understand why you did it. And I'm glad you're who you are, even if I didn't know it before." Catherine's throat was tight. "I'm glad too, despite everything." "Teach me," Daniel said. "Up there on the ridge. Teach me how you do what you do. You're not going to become a sniper." "Why not?" "It's apparently in my blood. Because I don't want that life for you." "Too late, Mom. I'm already in the military, already deployed to a combat zone. You can either teach me how to survive or let me figure it out the hard way." He had her there. "Fine," Catherine said, "but you follow my instructions exactly. No improvisation, no heroics. We observe, we report, and we get out. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." That night, they prepared together. Catherine checked their equipment with methodical precision, explaining each decision. Why certain gear was essential, why other gear was too heavy, how to pack for mobility. Daniel watched and learned. "Your father would be proud of you," Catherine said as they worked. "Would he be proud of you? Doing this?" "I don't know. We never talked about what I would do if I had to go back. He knew I could. We just hoped I wouldn't have to." "Do you miss it? The work you used to do?" Catherine paused, considering. "I miss the clarity, the purpose. I miss knowing exactly what I was supposed to do and being good at it. But I don't miss what it cost. I don't miss the person I had to become." "What kind of person was that?" "Someone who could look at another human being through a scope and pull the trigger without hesitation. Someone who could compartmentalize death until it was just another task to complete. She looked at her son. I became that person because the mission required it. But I didn't want to be her forever. I didn't want you to be her son. I'm her son anyway. I know. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. Daniel's voice was firm. You did what you thought was right. I might not agree with all of it, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my life resenting you for trying to protect me. They finished packing in silence. Then Catherine pulled out her old notebook and showed him the pages. This is how you calculate for distance, she said. This is how you read wind. This is what terrain does to a bullet's trajectory. Daniel listened, absorbed every word, learning from his mother in a way he never had before. Just before midnight, they tried to sleep. Tomorrow would be dangerous. They needed rest. But Catherine lay awake, thinking about her son, about the strange path that had led them both here, to this frozen outpost, preparing for a mission that could kill them both. She had spent 14 years trying to be a normal mother, trying to give Daniel a life free from violence and secrets. Instead, she had given him both. But maybe that was not the worst thing. Maybe honesty, even painful honesty, was better than comfortable lies. Catherine closed her eyes and thought of her husband. What would he say about all this? Probably something like, "You're doing what you have to do. Keep our boy safe." She intended to, no matter what it cost. They left at 0400, moving through darkness that was just starting to soften toward dawn. Catherine led, Daniel followed, both of them silent as smoke. The ridge was 3 kilometers from the base. They covered the distance slowly, using terrain for concealment, stopping frequently to listen and observe. Catherine taught without words how to move, where to step, when to freeze. Daniel was a good student, better than she expected. By the time they reached the observation point, the sun was a pale line on the horizon. Catherine set up their position with care, using natural cover, creating sightlines in multiple directions. Now we wait, she whispered. Waiting was the hardest part. It always had been. They lay in the snow, watching the valley below. Catherine with her rifle, Daniel with binoculars and a radio. Hours passed. Around noon, Daniel spotted movement. East Ridge, he breathed. Multiple contacts. Catherine swung her scope. Saw them. 40, maybe 50 fighters, moving into position. They were staging for the assault, just as she had predicted. Count them, she said. Note their equipment. Get as much detail as you can. Daniel whispered into the radio, relaying information back to base. Major Patterson acknowledged. Defensive positions were being adjusted, but Catherine was focused on something else. Among the fighters, one man stood out. He moved differently, gave orders that others followed immediately, had better gear, better weapons, the leader. If you cut off the head, the body often fell apart. Not always, but often enough. Catherine did the math. 800 meters, downslope, wind from the northwest, maybe 10 miles per hour, snow affecting trajectory. It was not an impossible shot. She had made harder ones. But this was not her mission. They were here to observe. Report. That was all. Mom? Daniel had noticed where her rifle was pointing. What are you doing? Calculating. We're supposed to observe only. I know. So don't. Catherine did not move. If I take him out, it might disrupt their entire operation. They might postpone the attack. Give us more time to prepare. Or it might make them attack immediately, before we're ready. True. And it would reveal our position. We'd have to extract under fire. Also true. So why are you still aiming? Good question. Catherine watched the enemy leader through her scope. He was talking to his subordinates, pointing toward the base, planning how to kill everyone there, planning how to kill her son. Because I want to, Catherine said quietly. Because every instinct I have is telling me to pull this trigger. But you won't. I shouldn't. They were silent for a moment. Then the enemy leader moved, walked to the edge of the ridge, stood perfectly framed against the sky, and Catherine saw it. He was setting up a radio antenna, a powerful one, long-range communications. He's calling for reinforcements, she said. How do you know? That antenna. It's too big for local tactical comms. He's coordinating with someone far away. Daniel understood immediately. If he gets through, they could have another wave coming. Maybe 2. We wouldn't be ready. The leader was still exposed, still perfectly positioned. 800 meters. One shot. Catherine's finger rested on the trigger. It's your call, Mom, Daniel said softly. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Catherine thought about all the shots she had taken in her career, all the calculations, all the targets. She had never hesitated before, never questioned. The mission was the mission. But she was not that person anymore, was she? The leader finished setting up the antenna. In a few seconds, he would be under cover again. The opportunity would be gone. Catherine exhaled slowly. "Forgive me," she whispered. She fired. The world narrowed to the sight picture. The crosshairs, the gentle squeeze. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. 800 meters away, the enemy leader dropped. "Contact!" someone shouted in the valley below. "Sniper!" Chaos erupted. Fighters scrambling, looking for the source of the shot. "Time to go," Catherine said calmly. They moved fast, abandoning the observation point, using the terrain to break line of sight. Behind them, enemy fire began chewing through the spot where they had been. Daniel was on the radio. "Base, this is Scout 2. We are compromised and extracting. Enemy knows our position." "Copy, Scout 2. We have your location. Air support is inbound." Catherine led them down the ridge, choosing speed over stealth now. They could hear pursuit behind them. Not close yet, but getting closer. "How far to extraction?" Daniel panted. 2 clicks, maybe less. They ran through snow and rocks. Catherine's lungs burned. She was not as young as she used to be, but her body remembered this too. The desperate escape, the race against pursuit. Gunfire behind them, still not accurate, but getting closer. They reached the tree line. Better cover here. Catherine slowed slightly, picking their path more carefully. "Mom, they're gaining." "I know. Keep moving." A bullet cracked past Catherine's head. Too close. She turned and fired back blind, not trying to hit anything, just making them flinch, buying seconds. They kept running. The base was ahead now. They could see the perimeter fence, but the enemy was right behind them. Catherine stopped, made a decision. "Go," she said to Daniel. "What?" "No, get to the base. I'll hold them here." "I'm not leaving you." "Daniel." She grabbed his shoulders, looked him in the eyes. "I can slow them down. You can't. Get to the base. Tell Patterson what we saw. That's the mission." "Screw the mission. As your mother, I'm asking. As your superior officer, I'm ordering." She had no authority to order anything, but her voice carried the weight of someone who was used to being obeyed. "Move. Now." Daniel's face was anguished, but he moved. Catherine watched him run toward the fence. Then she turned to face the pursuit. There were at least 15 of them, maybe more. She had 1 rifle and whatever ammunition she had left. She smiled grimly. It felt good to be doing this again, even knowing what it would cost. The first enemy fighter came into view. Catherine dropped him. The others scattered for cover. She moved to a new position, fired again, moved again. Old tactics, old training. The enemy was confused. They had been pursuing 2 people. Now it was just 1. Where was the other? Catherine used their confusion, picking them off when they exposed themselves, forcing them to be cautious. Minutes passed like hours. Then she heard it, the beautiful sound of helicopter rotors. Air support. Finally, Catherine pulled back, running for the base now. The helicopter opened up with its guns, tearing through the tree line where the enemy was sheltering. She hit the perimeter fence. Soldiers pulled her through. Daniel was there, grabbing her, checking for wounds. "Are you insane?" he shouted over the rotor noise. "Probably," Catherine admitted. The helicopter made another pass. Enemy fire ceased. Major Patterson was there, his face grim. "Did you get what we needed?" "Better." Catherine was breathing hard. "Their leader is down. Reinforcement antenna is destroyed. They're disorganized. How long do we have?" 24 hours, maybe less. But they'll come with less coordination now, smaller groups. Patterson nodded. "Then we'd better be ready." Catherine looked at the base, at the soldiers preparing for the next fight, at her son, who was looking at her with a mixture of anger and pride and love. "We'll be ready," she said. She had crossed the final line, picked up the rifle not just in self-defense, but in offense, made the choice to be the person she thought she had left behind. There was no pretending anymore, no hiding. Catherine Reeves was back, and God help anyone who threatened the people she loved. The second attack came at dusk the next day. They were ready. Catherine had spent the intervening hours transforming the base's defenses. Not through technology or equipment they did not have time, but through positioning, understanding sight lines, creating kill zones. When the enemy came, they found a very different fight than they expected. The battle lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of controlled chaos. Catherine coordinated fire from the command center, directing soldiers to where they were most needed, calling out targets, managing the defense with the same precision she once used for individual shots. Daniel was with his squad, holding the northeastern sector. Catherine watched him through the camera feeds, seeing him lead his people with the same calm competence she had once shown. He was learning, growing, becoming the soldier he was meant to be. The thought made her proud and terrified in equal measure. The enemy assault broke against their defenses. Not easily. They lost good people. But the base held. When the sun rose on the next day, the enemy was gone, retreated, scattered. Victory. But Catherine felt no triumph. Only exhaustion. She was in the command center when the medics brought in the casualty report. 7 dead, 19 wounded, 3 critically. 7 families would get visits from officers in dress uniforms. 7 mothers would answer their doors to the worst news possible. Catherine thought about those mothers, thought about Daniel, thought about how close she had come to being one of them. "We held," Major Patterson said quietly beside her. "Because of you. Because of everyone. Don't deflect. You turned a green base into a defensible position in 3 days. You took out their leadership. You coordinated a defense against superior numbers. This was you. 7 soldiers are still dead. And 300 are alive." Catherine did not know what to say to that. Patterson put a hand on her shoulder. "Higher command wants to put you in for a commendation. I told them you'd say that. I don't exist on paper. That was the deal when I retired. You've been existing on paper for the last 3 days. Everyone here knows who you are. Let them remember me as a mother who helped her son's base, not as whatever else I was." Patterson studied her. "What will you do now?" "Go home. Try to remember how to be Catherine Hart again. Is that even possible?" "I don't know." They stood in silence, watching the base return to normal operations. Repair crews, medical teams, soldiers who had survived their first real combat. Daniel found her an hour later. He was dirty and exhausted but uninjured. "Hey," he said. "Hey yourself. We did it. You did it. You and your squad held your position perfectly. I had a good teacher." Daniel paused. "Mom, I've been thinking about what you said, about not wanting this life for me." Catherine's heart clenched. "Daniel, I'm staying in. Not because of you, because of me. Because last night, when everything was chaos, I knew exactly what to do. And that felt right. You don't have to follow my path. I'm not. I'm following my own path. It just happens to be similar to yours in some ways." He smiled tiredly. "I'm not going to be a sniper. I don't have the patience for that. But I am going to be the best damn infantry soldier I can be." Catherine pulled him into a hug. "I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you too. Even if you did lie to me for 22 years. I'll make it up to you. You already have." They held each other while the base rebuilt around them. 3 days later, Catherine packed her bag. The visitor quarters felt smaller now, or maybe she felt smaller in them. Hard to tell. Daniel walked her to the gate. "Write to me," he said. "Not emails, actual letters, old school. I can do that. And Mom, no more secrets. If something important happens, if there's something I should know, tell me. I promise." They hugged one last time. Then Catherine walked through the gate, back to civilian life. The guards saluted her as she passed. Word had spread about what she had done, about who she was. Catherine did not acknowledge the salutes. She just kept walking. A car was waiting to take her to the nearest airport. She got in and watched the base disappear behind her. Major Patterson had tried to convince her to stay, consult long-term, maybe even come back officially, but Catherine had refused. She had done what needed to be done. No more, no less. Now it was time to go home. The question was, who would be going home? Catherine Hart, the mother and widow, or Catherine Reeves, the soldier who could never fully retire? Maybe both, maybe something in between. She closed her eyes and let herself rest. The first real rest in days. When she opened them again, they were at the airport. Catherine thanked the driver and went inside. Normal people everywhere. Travelers worried about delays in luggage, so oblivious to how fragile their safety really was. Catherine envied them. She made it through security and found her gate. Sat down to wait. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "The base commander wants to name the Western Tower after you. I told him you'd hate that. I was right, wasn't I?" Catherine smiled and typed back. "Very right. Tell him to use the money for better equipment instead." Another message. "Will do. Love you, Mom." "Love you too." Catherine put her phone away and stared out the window at planes taking off and landing. Somewhere in the world, other soldiers were fighting other battles. Some of them would come home, some would not. She had been so lucky to survive her own service, to come home, to build a life. And when that life collided with her past, She had been lucky again. She and Daniel both made it through. Not everyone was that lucky. Catherine thought about the 7 soldiers who died defending the base, thought about their families, their futures, now never to be. The price of victory was always paid by someone. She had just been fortunate enough not to pay it herself this time. The announcement for her flight came over the speakers. Catherine stood, shouldered her bag, and got in line. Behind her, a military base in winter, a son who now knew his mother's truth, a legend that would live on in whispered stories. Ahead, home, quiet streets, a life she had chosen. Catherine boarded the plane and found her seat by the window. As they took off, she looked down at the mountains below. Somewhere in those frozen valleys, soldiers were still on watch. She hoped they were ready. She hoped they would never need someone like her again. But she knew better. There would always be another crisis, another impossible situation, another time when ordinary soldiers needed something extraordinary. Catherine just hoped that next time, she would not be anywhere near it. The plane climbed higher, leaving the mountains behind. Catherine closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But even in dreams, she was still calculating distances, still reading the wind, still her mother's daughter and her son's mother and something else entirely. Some things, it seemed, you never really left behind, no matter how far you ran. 2 weeks after she returned home, Catherine received a package. No return address. Military courier. Signed for with her civilian name but clearly from official channels. She opened it carefully. Inside, a letter on official letterhead and a small wooden box. The letter was from someone with a title Catherine did not recognize and a signature she could not read. But the message was clear. Mrs. Hart, your actions at FOB Sentinel have been reviewed by the appropriate authorities. Your service, past and present, is acknowledged and appreciated. However, in accordance with your original separation agreement and subsequent classification of your military record, no official commendation will be issued. Your recent activities will be documented in sealed files, accessible only to those with appropriate clearance. This should not be interpreted as a lack of gratitude. Rather, it is a continuation of the protection you requested when you chose to separate from active duty. Your anonymity will be maintained. The enclosed item is not an official award. Consider it a personal acknowledgement from those of us who understand what you have sacrificed and what you continue to sacrifice. Thank you. Catherine set the letter aside and opened the wooden box. Inside was a single rifle round, pristine, unfired, engraved with coordinates. She recognized them immediately. The coordinates of FOB Sentinel. No medal, no ceremony, no public recognition. Just this. A bullet that would never be fired. A reminder of bullets that were... Catherine held it up to the light. She thought about all the commendations she had received in her first career. The award ceremony she never attended because the operation was classified. The medals locked in a safe somewhere, associated with a name that no longer existed. This was better somehow, more honest. She placed the round back in its box and put it in her closet, next to the notebook of calculations she had brought back from the base. Artifacts of a life that insisted on following her. That evening her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Hart? This is Major Patterson. Catherine sat down. Major, I thought we agreed no contact unless absolutely necessary. This is necessary. There's been a development. Her heart clenched. Daniel? He's fine. Better than fine. But I thought you should know. He's been accepted into advanced tactical training. Reconnaissance specialist track. Catherine was quiet for a moment. He didn't tell me he applied. The application was submitted 3 days after you left. I'm guessing he wanted to be sure before he told you. Recon, not infantry. He said he wanted to learn to see the battlefield the way his mother does. Those were his exact words. Catherine closed her eyes. He's going to follow that path, isn't he? Not the same path, his own path. But yes, a similar one. God help him. Mrs. Hart. Catherine. He's good. Really good. Natural instincts, tactical mind, stays calm under pressure. He's going to be an asset. I know. That's what scares me. Patterson was quiet for a moment. Then, I thought you should also know, the attack on our base was part of a larger operation. Coordinated strikes on multiple installations. We were one of only 2 that successfully repelled the assault. Good. The other base had a full battalion of experienced troops. We had you. I've included that in my report, the classified version. I appreciate the discretion. It's not discretion, it's respect, for who you are and who you chose to become. After they hung up, Catherine sat in her quiet house and thought about respect. about sacrifice, about the choices we make and the way they echo through generations. She had tried so hard to keep Daniel away from this life. Instead, she had given him the tools to excel at it. Was that a failure, or was it simply the natural consequence of being who she was? Catherine did not know. She made herself dinner, went through her evening routine, tried to settle back into normal life. But normal felt like a costume now, something she wore but did not quite believe in. The next morning, Daniel called. "Hey, Mom. Hey yourself. I hear congratulations are in order." Silence. Then, "Major Patterson told you." "He did. Recon specialist, huh? I know you probably I think you're following your instincts, making your own choices. That's what I raised you to do. Even if those choices lead me into danger, especially then. I can't protect you from the world, Daniel. I can only give you the tools to protect yourself. You sound like you're okay with this." Catherine looked at the wooden box in her closet, at the notebook filled with calculations, at the life she had built on the foundation of who she used to be. "I'm terrified," she said honestly. "Every parent is terrified when their child goes into harm's way. But I'm also proud, because you're not doing this to prove something to me. You're doing it because it's who you are. Who I am is partly because of who you are. I know, and I have to live with that." They talked for another half hour, about his training, about life on base, about everything except the weight they both carried now. After they hung up, Catherine went for a walk. Her neighborhood was quiet, safe, boring in the best possible way. People waved as she passed. Mrs. Hart, the widow who lived on Maple Street, the one who kept her lawn nice and volunteered at the library. They had no idea, and that was fine. Catherine preferred it that way. But as she walked, she found herself observing. Sight lines, cover positions. How fast could someone move from that corner to that doorway? Where would you position a defensive perimeter? Old habits. They would never fully go away. Catherine came home as the sun was setting. She made tea and sat on her back porch, watching darkness fall. Somewhere, Daniel was training, learning, becoming something more than he had been. Somewhere, other soldiers were standing watch, protecting people who would never know their names. Somewhere, other mothers were worrying about their children in uniform. Catherine was one of millions, and also completely alone in understanding what it meant to be both the mother and the soldier, both the protected and the protector. She sipped her tea and let the quiet evening wash over her. This was her life now, straddling two worlds, belonging fully to neither. It was not what she had planned, but it was what she had, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Catherine finished her tea and went inside. Tomorrow she would wake up and be Mrs. Hart again. Quiet, normal, forgettable. But tonight, she allowed herself to remember, to acknowledge, to grieve for the person she had been and could never fully leave behind. The round in the wooden box gleamed in the darkness. A thank you with no name attached. Silent gratitude from people who understood. It was more than most soldiers ever got. It was more than Catherine had expected. And in its own way, it was perfect. Spring came early that year. Catherine watched the snow melt from her back porch, coffee in hand, thinking about cycles. Winter to spring, war to peace, one life to another. Daniel graduated from his reconnaissance training with honors. Catherine attended the ceremony in civilian clothes, sitting in the back, trying not to draw attention. But the instructors knew. Word had spread, even in the larger military community, the legend of the mother who saved FOB Sentinel. They treated her with quiet respect. No questions, no fuss, just knowing nods, and the kind of acknowledgement that needed no words. Daniel introduced her to his new unit. Young men and women who looked at her with curiosity and something like awe. "This is my mom," he said simply. They shook her hand, made polite conversation, pretended not to know. It was the kindest thing they could have done. After the ceremony, Catherine and Daniel had dinner at a restaurant near the base. "You know they're going to ask," Daniel said. "My unit, about you, and you'll tell them I'm just your mom. They won't believe me. Let them wonder." Daniel smiled. "You really don't want the recognition, do you? Recognition complicates things. I did what needed to be done, that's all." "That's never all, though. Is it?" Catherine looked at her son, 22 years old, a soldier now, a man. "No," she admitted. "It's never all. Every choice costs something. Every action has consequences. I saved lives at that base. But I also exposed truths I had kept buried for 14 years. I protected you from who I was, and in doing that, I made it harder for you to understand me. There's no clean answer to any of it. Do you regret it? Any of it? I regret the lying. I regret that you had to find out the way you did. But do I regret saving your life? Saving those soldiers? No, never. Good. Daniel reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Because I don't regret any of it either. I'm glad I know. I'm glad I understand. And I'm glad you were there when we needed you. They finished their dinner in comfortable silence. Then Daniel walked her to her car. Where are they sending you? Catherine asked. Can't say specifically. But it's not a combat zone. Just training rotations and readiness exercises. For now, he agreed. They hugged. Catherine held her son and tried not to think about all the dangers he would face. All the situations she would not be there to protect him from. Be safe, she whispered. I learned from the best. Catherine drove home through the spring evening. The world was greening up, trees budding, life returning. She thought about the base in winter, the snow and the cold and the fear. It felt like another lifetime already, but she knew it would stay with her. Those 3 days would be part of her forever, just like all the other operations and missions and impossible situations she had faced in her first career. You did not leave that behind, you just learned to carry it. Catherine pulled into her driveway. Her neighbor was out planting flowers. Mrs. Hart, how was your trip? Wonderful. My son graduated from his training program. Oh, how lovely. You must be so proud. I am. Will you be at the library volunteer meeting tomorrow? Wouldn't miss it. Normal conversation, normal life. Catherine went inside and unpacked her bag, put away the dress she had worn to the ceremony, made herself dinner. The house was quiet, empty. She thought about calling someone. But who? She had friends, but none who would understand this strange hollowness, this feeling of being between worlds. Instead, she went to her closet and took out the wooden box. The rifle round gleamed in the evening light. Catherine held it and thought about all the rounds she had fired, all the distances, all the calculations. She thought about the shot on the ridge, 800 meters, the enemy leader dropping. She had killed people in her career. Not many, by some standards. More than most, by others. She had made peace with that long ago, or thought she had. But taking that shot at the ridge had been different, because it was not orders, not a mission, just her own choice, made in a moment, based on her own judgment. That made it personal in a way nothing else had been. Catherine put the round back in its box and closed the lid. The phone rang. Unknown number again. Hello? Mrs. Hart. This is General Rebecca Morrison. Catherine sat down hard. She knew that name. Everyone who had ever operated in her circles knew that name. General, I'm calling to personally thank you for your actions at FOB Sentinel and to offer you a position. I'm retired. I'm aware. This wouldn't be active duty, more of a consultant role. We're developing new training protocols for long-range specialists. Your experience and expertise would be invaluable. Mrs. Hart. General, with respect, my answer is no. I left that life. I'm not coming back to it, not even part-time. Silence on the other end. Then, may I ask why? Catherine thought about how to explain. Because every time I pick up a rifle, I become someone else. Someone I spent 14 years putting to rest. And I can't keep doing that. I can't keep switching between Catherine Hart and Catherine Reeves. I'll lose myself entirely. I understand. The general's voice was softer now. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. We need people who know when to walk away just as much as we need people who can't. Thank you. But Mrs. Hart, if you ever change your mind, if there's ever a situation where you decide you're needed, you have my number now. Don't hesitate to use it. After they hung up, Catherine sat in the quiet house and thought about need. The military needed her. Daniel needed her. The country needed people like her. But what did she need? Peace. Quiet. The ability to walk down the street without calculating firing positions. The ability to be just a mother, just a woman, just herself. Catherine went to bed early that night, and for the first time in weeks, she slept through until morning. When she woke, the sun was bright and the world was green. She made coffee and sat on her porch and listened to birds. No sirens, no gunfire, no desperate calculations. Just spring. Daniel called that afternoon. Hey, Mom, just wanted to let you know I made it to my new posting. Everything's good. I'm glad. I miss you. I miss you too. Mom, thank you. For everything. For being who you are. For showing me what courage looks like. For giving me the tools to do this work. Catherine's throat was tight. You're welcome. But Daniel, promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll know when it's time to stop, when it's time to walk away. Don't let this life consume you. I promise. They talked for a while longer, then said goodbye. Catherine set her phone down and looked out at her neighborhood. Mrs. Henderson was walking her dog. The Martinez kids were playing basketball in their driveway. Mr. Chen was washing his car. Normal life. Beautiful in its ordinariness. Catherine had fought to protect this. The quiet streets, the oblivious peace. And now she got to live in it. That was enough. It had to be enough. She picked up a book and started to read. Lost herself in someone else's story for a while. When the sun set that evening, Catherine stood at her window and looked out at the darkening sky. Somewhere, soldiers were standing watch. Somewhere, mothers were worrying. Somewhere, impossible situations were being resolved by people with impossible skills. But not here. Not tonight. Tonight,